Have you ever had a blade that you thought, man, this is such a nice sword? I wish I had a much bigger version of it. Have I got the sword for you? Okay, so all jokes aside, this is actually how this type of blade developed. It was really nothing unusual when the forging technology could support building much longer blades that they would do it. We have examples of this in both Jian and Dao preceding the Han Dynasty and even back to the Warring States era. So having a sword like this in the Song Dynasty much later was really nothing of a stretch, so to speak. Really, this has a lot more behind it, especially under the name of Zhanma Dao, which means horse chopping blade. Now, of course, there have been records of longer blades in the past before this, and there have been mentions of a blade so sharp that it could chop through, or it could chop the head off of a horse. But really, it didn't describe a particular blade in mass, and this is where this blade comes into play. It's important to know the history on this, specifically what was going on in the Song Dynasty at the time, why they made this blade, and why they made so many of them. Now, this particular design comes from the Northern Song Dynasty, and this was the first time that it was actually recorded as a Zhanma Dao, and that means horse cutting blade. Now, of course, people will mention, that they've had swords and blades sharp enough to chop the head off a horse, but this one was named for a very specific reason. Now, what was going on at that time is you have the northern tribes invading basically the Song Dynasty area, and these are the Jurchen tribes or even the combined tribes of the Jin Dynasty. And they already had an advantage because they were used to horseback and cavalry style warfare. Now, it's not that the Chinese didn't understand that style of warfare, but they had a shortage of war horses at the time. So limited amount of divisions and cavalry and troops that could be on horseback put them at a disadvantage. Now, on top of that, the Jurchens decided to cover themselves completely with armor from head to toe, and even covered their horses in armor. This became almost impenetrable by the infantry, and they could just literally just charge in through, shoot down the infantry, chop them down with their swords or with their polearms, and really just make a mess of the Song Dynasty soldiers. It got so bad, they actually started giving that style of soldier a name. They called them Tie Futu, and Tie Futu means like Iron Buddha or like Iron Pagoda, and it just became the symbol of something you just couldn't beat. Now, they even stepped that up a little bit more by tying the horses together with long chains or thick ropes. And what they would do is ride with about 5 horses tied together and just plow through troops. So it was really devastating, and they had to come up with something to combat this, especially with the Song Dynasty having a shortage of war horses, and most of their work had to be done on foot. Now, at this point steps in China's most celebrated patriot, Yue Fei. Now, if the name sounds a little bit familiar, you might recognize it as Fei Yue, like the shoes. And there's a lot of things named after him and a lot of things associated with him because he's such a hero. He's such a true, courageous, patriotic hero in Chinese history. And he was a living general, and there's lots of records of him doing great things for China. So it wasn't just a lot of just stories and a fictional character. Now, there's a story about him being very honorable, and he had a lot of filial piety, and he was taking care of his elderly mother, and he didn't want to actually conscript to go to war because he wanted to take care of his mother. He was the only child. And she changed his mind by tattooing 4 words on his back: loyalty to one's country. And that became a true symbol of him as well. And he decided that's when he would go off and fight for his country. So it really shows the kind of character he was. But beyond that, I mean, he had a lot of great tactics. His army that he raised became so well known that they said that it was unstoppable. And that's where this sword comes in. Now, I'm not going to say that he was the one that designed it, but he was the one that implemented it and really earned this sword the fame that it got to the point where there were specific imperial military designs and specifications for these swords to be forged, and there were specific forges just built only for making horse chopping blades. Now, his idea was, if you have these Tiefutu, iron Buddha, iron pagodas charging at you, tied together, the best way to take down 5 horses at once is chop the legs off. Once you have one horse down, the other horses that are tied up to it can't go anywhere, and that's where you can take advantage and attack the enemy. Because otherwise, the only areas that were exposed were going to be around the eyes and around the feet of the horse, and poking it with spears can kind of make the horse a little bit nervous, but if you can stop the horses completely with something like this, then you actually have a good fighting chance. And it actually worked. They ended up pushing the Jurchens back, and he ended up not only gaining some ground that the Song dynasty had lost, but he was able to defend the northern territories until later on he got called back down and they didn't really get to push much further from there. But really, this sword earned that name, and it had a specific purpose. So it's really the name of the tool itself. And later on, we do get swords that are long-handled broadswords that do also carry that name as well, although they may or may not have been used in such a manner. So here's what to expect if you end up getting one from LK Chen and you get a Chanma Dao for yourself. Now, this is a one-to-one replica based off of an antique from the Northern Song dynasty. So we know exactly what the size was. There are existing documents with imperial measurements, and there were so many forges and so many of these blades on hand, you know exactly what the sizes were at the time. And it's a hefty, hefty blade. The distal taper on this blade starts at 1 centimeter thick just at the guard, and the blade itself is quite a long blade. I'll leave all of the specifications down in the link or in the description below, and I'll leave a link to their website so you can see all of that. Now, similar to what I had mentioned in the very beginning, we have the almost an exact same design as the Song Hand Dao, and you have the same blade shape with the clipped end. The only main difference between the two is the Hand Dao has a fitting right here, just above the guard, which is absent on the Chanma Dao. And otherwise, you have almost an identical blade, just on a very, very long handle. Now, this thing is hefty. It weighs about 5.5 pounds, and it really carries itself when you're swinging this around. So do be ready for some extra work on the arms. Once you start swinging it, it's going to carry itself, and you have to control that. So just be aware. It's something I mention pretty much with every sword, but this is probably the most extreme case that I've found from LK Chen. Now, the grip is going to be a little bit different from the Hand Dao. The Hand Dao had a black cord wrapping. This has more of a thicker, almost hemp-like feeling wrapping here. And that was also something specific to how the swords were made at the time. It has the ring pommel that you see and a little bit of tang sticking out, and that's also something you see on every one of these swords. So that's not unusual to mine. It also has the peach seed style guard. So again, you have the point indexing where the blade edge is, and the coverage makes sure to cover the knuckles completely, and the back of the hand is actually pretty well covered. The one thing I really like about this, and it's something you have to feel when you're holding it, is that the back of the grip is actually a lot thicker than the front. So it's got a forward taper that holds in the hand much easier. And then we also have a taper going down towards the base of the grip too. So it's a little bit thicker towards the guard, a little bit thinner towards the base, which allows your backhand to slide, because you're going to be needing a lot of movement here for certain times. If you cross the body, you're going to need to bring your hand up, and then when you want maximum leverage, you bring that hand back down. This thing is a hefty, hefty blade. So do be ready for that, and do be ready for this amount of length of blade. It's got a lot of blade edge. It's a long blade, and Like I said, this thing wants to chop. The last thing is this sword comes with a leather sheath. They don't have a wooden scabbard like you see with the Songhand Dao. They just have a nice sewn leather sheath that covers the blade. It's not going to hold it in there very tight. It's just to make sure that you don't cut anything you don't want to, and you have a safe place to keep it from the elements. But otherwise, the blade itself is what you're getting with this, and it is quite a blade. All right, so that's pretty much it. I hope you guys know now what to expect and a little bit of history behind the name and what made this sword so important during the Song Dynasty. Now, I'll leave a link in the description below so you can actually check this sword out on LK Chen's website and you can pick one up for yourself. And as always, if you have one of these swords and you want to share any information that I may have missed or any advice for anybody that's interested in getting this blade, go ahead and leave it in the comments down below. If it's really good, I'll pin it up on the top so people can be pointed in the best direction. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed this what to expect, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Bye.